Landscapes are pictures of the world around us. They can be city scenes full of people, rural scenes, or scenes that don't show any human influence. In this video, we'll explore possibilities in making a landscape with chalk pastels. Chalk is formed naturally over millions of years as the shells of marine creatures called coccoliths break down on the ocean floor. You can find whole shorelines made of chalk. It's mostly the chemical calcium carbonate. Calcium is in bones, in milk, and many foods. Chalk pastels are made by grinding chalk with pigments to give them their bright colors. Colored paper is a great background for your landscape. You might choose a dark value like black, or a turquoise, or a light value like this yellow, dark blue, purple. It's really up to you. You might choose an image as a visual reference for your landscape, or you might just use your imagination. For this video, I'll make two simple landscapes from my imagination, and then another using a visual reference. In this first one, using the black background, I decided to make a hill with this light blue color in the foreground, that's the front, and I'm pushing a little harder near the top edge to create more chalk in that area. You may notice that my hills are not very steep. Even the grand mountain called Mount Everest by many people only has a 35-degree angle on it. For the second hill, I'm going to use a darker blue color, as though it's a nighttime scene and it's harder to see this darker hillside behind the first one. Again, I'm pushing using the side of the chalk to really lay down a lot of chalk at one time. And I think for the back hill, I'll use a dark green for this one. My hills are just simple wavy lines, and you can really explore what it feels like to put down the chalk using the side of the chalk. You can blend two colors together. Now I'm adding the dark blue on top of the green to create a new color, just like if I was using paints. I can do the same thing with the blue, adding a little bit of green to that. This is creating some unity as the colors are becoming more similar. Maybe I'll even do the same thing in this front hill that was very bright, but now I'm adding some of that dark blue from the second hill to sort of unify those two colors. You can use your fingers to blend the colors together and also press them into the fiber of the paper. It can get a little messy. Make sure you keep the chalk just on your fingers. And notice how it really changes the look. It smooths things out when I blend it with my fingertips. I'm trying a little white chalk here. A little light green to give some highlights to the hills. Have fun exploring chalk pastel and seeing what kind of simple landscape you can make just with a few stripes of color. For my next landscape that I'll create from my imagination, I'm choosing a dark blue background, and I'm choosing some warm colors to go with that. I'm also picking out a few neutral colors like these browns, some black, and white. This one will be a little different than the last one. It'll be slightly more realistic. I'll use some of my imagination and observations I've made in the past about the world around me. This time, again, I'm starting with a horizon line of hills, keeping it fairly flat. And I'm putting in some light ideas. Notice this time that front hill is covering some of the hill behind it, the one I drew in orange. And since these lines are so small and light, if I changed my mind it would be fine. But I'm pretty happy with that design, so I'm going to go ahead and move to the sideways use of the chalk and fill in this front hillside. For time's sake, I'm going to start speeding up this video. Every second you see is actually 8 seconds in real life. So this is many times faster than I would normally be working. Keep that in mind as you do your work. It should be much slower than what you're seeing here. Again, you're seeing me play with how much chalk I'm putting on the paper, and I'll blend the colors together, maybe adding a little of the orange into the yellow or the yellow into the red, creating new colors unlike the ones that you see in the box. I'm adding a little brown to the red here, creating some darker regions with that neutral brown, pushing hard with that yellow to create some highlights. I'll finish blending in these warm colors to each other, and then I wanted to add some trees, which I did off camera, and some clouds. One thing I've noticed about observing cumulus clouds over the years is that they're bumpy on the top and sort of flat on the bottom. I can use my past observations to help me when I imagine new artwork. That experience of looking closely and noticing things helps me as an artist. Once I've created these overlapping clouds, I can start to fill in the white areas. Another thing I've noticed from observing clouds carefully is near the bottom of each cloud, in the flat area, it tends to be a little darker there. So I'll add some black chalk along those bottom edges, and then I want to blend that in to the white to create a gray, but unfortunately I had a little orange chalk on my finger, so I created a bit of an orange cloud there. After cleaning off my finger, I can blend in the black in with the white and create a gray area near the bottom of each cloud. Now I need to brighten up the tops of the clouds again, so I'm bringing back the white chalk to do that. And it's a back and forth between the white chalk and the black and the blending to create the effect that I want. If I don't choose to exclusively use my imagination and my past experiences, I might use a photograph, or sometimes called a visual reference. In this case, I'm going to use this image of a lake with the trees reflected in the water and the clouds above and below. Using that photograph as a guide, I'm going to do a light pencil sketch since this is the most realistic landscape that I'll be making today. I added the horizon line where the lake meets the sky, and adding in my tree shapes, being careful to use symmetry above and below the water line. Notice how lightly I draw with the pencil. I want to be able to change my mind and not have the pencil lines be visible. You may have to really strain your eyes to see those very light lines that I'm using to create the tree shapes. This is me working at regular speed. You can see I'm being very thoughtful about the shapes, and just over to my left out of the view of the camera is the actual photograph, and I'm using that as a visual reference to know when the trees go up and when they go down and that sort of thing. I can decide if I want to change the photograph. For example, the clouds in the original image were cirrus clouds, the wispy light ones, and I think I prefer the cumulus clouds. I think that'll be a more interesting composition. I could use visual reference of those cumulus clouds, or again my imagination as I did in the previous landscapes. I'm being careful to make sure to mirror what I see above the water line back into the water itself. That symmetry is essential for this landscape as I imagined it. I can imagine that watching me draw these very light lines is not terribly interesting, so I'm going to speed up the video. Keep in mind that every second that you see here on screen is about 20 seconds in real life. It is much slower. Don't try to create at the speed you see here. So notice how I'm referring to the photograph to look for the highlights and the shadows in the trees. I'm leaving a blank area where I want my clouds to be. This time I'm using a paper towel or a tissue to blend the blue colors together. adding in those clouds above and below, using the paper towel to blend the gray into the white. Notice some darker areas of the sky, so I'm going to push harder with my chalk in those areas to darken up the sky. I'm doing that because I noticed it in the visual reference, the photograph. Experimented with the end of a pencil as a way to create a texture in the water. What do you think? Does this look like ripples to you? So decide if you'll create a landscape from your own imagination or a more realistic one using a visual resource. Experiment with blending colors and representing either the natural world or maybe a city scene with lots of people around. The purpose of every artwork is to prepare you to make your next artwork. Enjoy the process of making your landscape and see where it takes you. What will you create?